Hello, and welcome back to the Selling Point Podcast. My name's Anthony Nix, and I am the Chief Fractional Sales Officer for Transformative Sales Systems. And I know the last few episodes have been off of the series that we were doing on sales qualification. So we're going to get back to that and finish off these last couple of episodes. And this one's something that frustrates a lot of salespeople. It's that moment when a deal seems to be going really well. You've had great conversations and you've uncovered the buyer's problem. You've put together a proposal, and then suddenly everything slows down. The proposal goes out and nothing happens. You follow up. Maybe you get a polite response. Maybe you get that infamous silence. Maybe the prospect says something like, well, we're reviewing it internally, or we're comparing options. And of course, the classic one, we'll get back to you. If you've been in sales for any length of time, you have experienced this. You know how this feels. And when it happens, a lot of salespeople assume something changed on the buyer's side. Maybe the price was too high, or the competitor showed up. Maybe the buyer lost interest. And absolutely, sometimes those things are in fact true. But really, very often, the problem started much earlier in the sales process. The salesperson never uncovered how the decision was actually going to be made on the buyer's side. And that's what we're going to dig into a little deeper today. One of the biggest misunderstandings in sales is the idea that a proposal is the final step before closing the deal. In reality, the proposal is often just the beginning of the buyer's decision process. Think about it from the buyer's perspective. Once they receive the proposal, several things might still need to happen. They may need to involve additional stakeholders. They might need to compare vendors. Some buying processes actually have a requirement for a certain number of quotations. There may be a need to present the proposal to internal stakeholders. There might be potential that they still have to get a budget approved. And if the salesperson hasn't qualified how those things will happen, the deal enters into a stage of just uncertainty. The proposal becomes a document that the buyer reviews instead of a conversation that moves the decision forward. So when we talk about decision criteria, we're talking about how the buyer will evaluate potential solutions. In other words, what factors will determine who wins the business? It might be price. It could be, the speed at which you can implement the solution. It could be technical capabilities of the sources that are providing the service or product. Could be your experience or your reputation. Might even be, service and support. But here is really the key point. If the salesperson does not understand the buyer's decision criteria before the proposal is delivered, the proposal becomes a kind of a guessing exercise. The salesperson is hoping they address the right priorities, but they really don't know. And when the proposal doesn't align with the buyer's real priorities, the deal just starts to drift. This is why so many deals stall at the proposal stage. The salesperson believes they've reached the finish line, but the buyer is just beginning the evaluation process. And if the salesperson doesn't know who is involved in the decision, what criteria is going to be used, how the evaluation will happen, and when the decision will be made, then the salesperson has very little control over what's going to happen next. The proposal becomes a comparison document. The buyer reviews it along with all of the other options they went out and gathered, and the salesperson sits and waits. And the waiting period is where the deal often starts losing momentum. Strong sales qualification includes understanding the decision process before the proposal is created. And this means asking questions like, who is going to be involved in this decision? What factors will be the most important when you evaluate the solutions? Are you currently comparing other vendors? What's the timeline that you're working towards? How will the final decision be made? These questions help the salesperson understand the buyer's internal process. They also help the salesperson position the solution in a way that aligns with the buyer's priorities. Without that understanding, the proposal really is, as I said before, just an educated guess. Another real common mistake salespeople make in sending proposals without scheduling a conversation to review them. They send the document and then they wait. And they hope the buyer comes back with good news. A stronger approach is to treat the proposal as the starting point for the next conversation. For example, instead of saying, I'll send you a proposal later today, you might say, I'll send the proposal over tomorrow. Why don't we schedule 30 minutes on Thursday to walk through it together and answer any questions? Now the proposal becomes part of a structured decision process, and the salesperson remains involved. Questions can be addressed, and the buyer is less likely to review the proposal in isolation. For sales leaders, understanding decision criteria is critical for accurate forecasting. If a salesperson submits a proposal but doesn't know who the decision makers are or what the criteria is for determining who will win, or how the evaluation process itself works, then the opportunity is so much less predictable than it appears. On the surface, it might look like late stage deal, but in reality, the decision process hasn't even started yet on the buyer's side. That's why the pipeline reviews should include questions about decision criteria. The sales manager should ask questions like, who's involved in the decision? What factors will determine the winner? What's the timeline for the decision? What is the next step after the proposal? And if those answers are unclear, the deal may not be as far along as it appears. There's another really important benefit to understanding the decision criteria on the buyer's side, and it allows the salesperson to help the buyer make a better decision. When the salesperson understands what matters most to the buyer, they can focus the conversation on the area that creates the most value for the buyer. Instead of competing on price alone, you can highlight outcomes. Instead of sending just a generic proposal, you can tailor the solution to the buyer's priority. And this shifts the conversation from comparison to collaboration. And that dramatically improves the chances of winning the business. Deals rarely stall after the proposal because the proposal itself was bad. Most often, they stall because the salesperson never fully understood how the buyer would make the decision. Without clear criteria, the proposal becomes a guessing exercise. The buyer just evaluates it internally, and the salesperson waits. And then the momentum of the deal begins to fade. Strong sales qualification prevents this. When salespeople understand the buyer's decision process before presenting the proposal, they can guide the conversation, position their solution effectively, and keep the deal moving forward. And when that happens, proposals stop being comparison documents and start becoming decision tools. I appreciate you guys listening to the Selling Point podcast, and I hope you found this episode helpful. If you'd like to learn more about us, you can go to transformativesalessystems.com. You can go to the blog, and you will find all of the podcasts in a article form there that you can do some additional reading and learn more about a specific topic that you are interested in. But once again, my name's Anthony Nix, and we'll see you next time on the Selling Point podcast.